So let's go ahead and add 2 more tests here. The first thing I'm going to say is, hey, given a particular type of search, we want to make sure that we're rendering a correct amount of cards, right? So going back to our app here, if I type, if I type like orange, right, it should only render 1. What's one of them that'll render 2? Black? Yep. If I type black, it should render black mirror and orange is the new black, right? That makes sense? So I want to test that functionality to make sure that that search is happening the way that I anticipated. So let's go in here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to import showcard as well. So import showcard from --showcard. And we're also going to import preload from /data.json. Okay. Under that, we're going to say test search should render correct amount of shows based on search term. Something like that. Oh, sorry, that's the third test we're going to write. Getting a little ahead of myself. The first one I just want to make sure is that given no search term that it's going to render everything. So we'll put that third test aside for a second. And we'll say search should render correct amount of shows. So just in case if you're not familiar with testing in JavaScript in general, this is the string that you're going to be shown if the test fails. So you want something descriptive enough that you can read that line and say, oh, I know what failed. That's the goal here. Okay, so we're going to say const component equals shallow search. And then here we're going to say expect preload dot shows dot length to equal component dot find showcard dot length.
You said that's what should be shown if it fails?
Right.
So for the first test, search renders correctly is what it shows when it fails.
Right, so it's going to say this is the test that failed, and it's going to highlight it in red, so search does not render correctly, right? That's kind of the negate. I see what you're getting at, that you would say something like search did not render correctly, right? Like a more just like an error type message. Yeah. That's not typically the paradigm that you write it with. Typically you write it with the paradigm of like, this is what this is testing, right? This is testing that search renders correctly, right? And then it shows it in red that this did not happen, right? That's kind of the implicit way of doing it. It's up to you, right? If that works better for you, then do that. But yeah, Mark?
Is there a describe wrapper to group the tests by type?
There is, yeah. You can do, I could totally wrap these with describe. In fact, I'll show you if you're interested. Describe search, right? So this would be like a search test suite. And then I would wrap all of these test statements in that. And then typically inside of describe, you would call these it. It and test are the same thing. And then here I would write, instead of saying search, right, I would say renders correctly. So it's like, instead of saying like test that this happens, it says it renders correctly. It should render the correct amount of shows, and it should render, right? That's the way that you would do that. Totally up to you, totally valid. I would do that if I had multiple things I was testing in one suite, but in this particular case, I have search that's tied to just the search component, and so it makes sense to put them all in one top level thing.
And I know with Mocha, they kind of advise against using arrow functions in their testing because context is that not true of jest, or
Their docs use it, so
okay.
that's good enough for me.
You can sort of get away with it in Mocha too. I was just
Yeah.
curious if.
I haven't heard anything to that effect, but this is less useful for stack traces. So if I have an error in here, I'm gonna get an anonymous function and not like a named function. So you have to make your trade-off. I don't want this line 17 test to run right now because it's not actually doing anything. So you can just put X test, and it's just not going to run it. So for example, if this test was flaky and I didn't want to run it right now while I'm testing other things, just put X test in front of it and it'll stop running it. And then when you're ready for it to run, you can just take the X off.
Is that the same with the it?
Yep, X it, and also X describe works for entire suites as well. So let's go ahead and run our tests again. So you can see here it says 1 skipped. That's the one that we skipped at the bottom. And 2 passed, right? So let's go make it fail. It's always a good idea to make sure that your tests fail when you expect them to fail too. So I'm going to go to search.jsx, and I'm going to put game back in here. So now I'm going to expect it to render a show card for every item, but it's not going to do it. It's only going to render Game of Thrones, right? So if I run this test again, you can see here, I failed my snapshot. That's fine. I expected that. So in this particular case, I expected the value to equal 1, and I received 15. I have these backwards, don't I? Okay, hold on. I do this all the time. So what I have in expect should be in to equal. I'm pretty sure I did this literally on the last time I gave this course too. Yep. So what goes inside of expect is what you're testing, and what goes inside of to equal is what the answer should be. It's minorly semantic, but you get more useful failures, right? So now if I run this again, I expect it to get 15, right? But I actually only got 1, right? The reason by that it only rendered Game of Thrones, and I expected it to render all 15 shows that I have possible. Does that make sense?
Do the focuses work also, like the describe and the its, like how in Jasmine?
Yeah, you can use all of those. Cool. So I'm going to go back to search.jsx. I'm going to drop this, save it.
Sorry, I can understand why you get confused about that, because it's expect actual value to equal expected value.
Yep, totally right. Whatever. I'm gonna keep messing it up forever. There are probably still tests at Netflix that are still inverted, so it's a them problem now.